Okay, as we continue with the experiential guide. Okay, so we're looking at the longer now, chapter 2, the longer now, the second insight, expanding the hysterical context. In a flight to Peru, our character meets history professor Dobson. Coincidentally, Dobson is already familiar with the second insight and expounds on the importance of understanding what's been happening in Western thought for the past 1,000 years as we complete this millennium and continue forward. The second insight, the context for coincidence. The second insight places our awareness of meaningful coincidence. Within a longer historical framework, it answers the following questions. Are our perceptions of these life coincidences important in this history, or are they merely a quirk or fad of our particular time, interesting to us but inconsequential to the future? Will our interest in the way the spiritual dimension seems to impact us and lead us forward significantly simply fade as human society evolves? The second insight involves stepping back and pondering the longer chain of events that clarifies what our new perceptions mean. The loss of the medical world view. From our vantage point, here in the waning years of the 20th century, poised as we are at the end of one millennium and the dawning of another, we are in a perfect position to see precisely our historical lineage. As the manuscript in the book suggests, we are breaking free from the preoccupations of the past 500 years, preoccupations that began at the end of the Middle Ages and the reaction of reformers against the excessive influence of the medieval church. Split of science and spirituality. Citing political corruption and the church's dogmatic adherence to scientifically disproved facts, Renaissance reformers sought to remove the intellectual shackles of a cosmology they believed to be replete with speculation and superstition. In this battle with the medieval church, a tacit agreement was finally reached, since science could have the freedom to explore worldly phenomena without interference, if it refrained from investigating aspects of the universe considered the domain of religion, humanity's relationship to gods, angels, miracles, or any other supernatural phenomena. Hence, early science gladly focused on the outside physical world. Discoveries came quickly. We began to map out and name the aspects of nature we found around us, careful to speak of these phenomena in concrete terms and physical causes. At the same time, new technologies were invented and energy sources were developed. The Industrial Revolution came as a byproduct, enhancing the production of goods, lifting more and more people into a new circular worldview. By the beginning of the 18th century, the church wielded much less influence. A new worldview based on scientific materialism began to replace the old church-ruled ideas concerning life. It was a time of great optimism. With science as our exploring tool, we felt we could ultimately discover everything about humanity's existential situation, including whether there was a God. If so, our relationship with God. This would take time, of course, and for now we would have to be content with turning our focus on conquering the perils of life and giving ourselves and our children a new circular security to replace the spiritual security that vanished when the medieval church was discredited. A new call to action motivated the time. Even if we had lost our certainty about God, mankind could face life and the hard realities of the universe, relying on knowledge and ingenuity. With hard work and cunning using our developing technology, we now were free to take life into our own hands. We could exploit the resources we found on this planet and make ourselves more secure. We had lost the certainty of our place in the universe the medieval church had provided, but we could replace it with a faith in science and a new work ethic around the idea of progress. Here we can see the psychological preoccupation that infused the modern age. Throughout the 18th, 19th, and 20th centuries, this new modern worldview expanded and instituted itself in our collective psyche. The more we mapped and named the physical phenomena in the universe, the more we could feel the world in which we lived was explained, predictable, secure, even ordinary and mundane. But in order to sustain this illusion, we had to constantly screen and psychologically repress anything that reminded us of the mystery of life. The agreement to avoid religious phenomena grew into an outright taboo. Even attending church became a mere social occasion. The pews were still filled on Sunday, but mostly as a statement of intellectual belief and a way to avoid any consideration of the spiritual during the rest of the week. By the middle of the 20th century, the universe had been almost totally secularized, reduced to its material components, but in order to create this illusion of a secure, plain world, we had to narrow our awareness of life, assume a kind of technological tunnel vision from which we dismissed out of hand any notion of the miraculous. To feel secure, we had to keep ourselves preoccupied, even obsessed with technological conquest of the world. Okay. Waking up to the mystery. Then we began to wake up. The reasons are many. By the 1950s, the science of physics itself began to revise the very materialistic view it had instituted. The universe was known to be not materialistic at all, but an interwoven pattern of energy systems where time could speed up and slow down, where the same elementary particle could appear in two places at the same time, and where space is curved and finite, but still unending and maybe multidimensional. Further, the technological manipulation of the space-time energy fabric had resulted in the creation of massive weapons now capable of ending life on Earth. At about the same time, other sciences began to rock our worldview, revealing the environmental damage resulting from the exploitation of the Earth's resources. Pollution was steadily poisoning our biological life support systems. Clearly, we were destroying the very world we hoped to improve with our progress. In the 1960s, we seemed to awaken enough to intuit en masse that Western culture had ignored the higher dimensions of human life. Material security had grown to a point where we could begin to address relevant social problems, inequality and prejudice among the races and between men and women, problems of pollution and war. It was a time of great idealism, but also of conflict between those who wanted society to change and those preferring the status quo. By the end of the decade, we seemed to realize that if we were to truly open up and turn our focus to our unexplored potential as human beings, it was not a matter of one group telling another it must change, trying to force social evolution. It's a matter of each person looking within, transforming within, and then, by collective effect, transforming society. Inner explorations. This seems to have been the awareness that propelled the introspective self-analysis that characterized much of the 1970s. It was a decade that saw a great expansion of human potential-oriented exploration. Humanistic psychology, the development of 12-step addiction programs, and the first research into the relationship of stress and attitudes to the onset of disease, all made significant impact on the public mind. In addition, an interest in Eastern religion thought emerged in the West. Yoga, the martial arts, and meditation all grew in popularity. The target of our explorations in therapy seemed to be the materialistic preoccupation itself. Focusing solely on the technological, economic side of life, it closed off a broad spectrum of experience. A full appreciation of beauty was overshadowed by a venal, utilitarian view wherein a tree, for instance, was appreciated not for its intricate beauty but its worth in lumber. Our own emotions of sorrow, love, and loss, empathy were dulled or repressed altogether. In this decade, it suddenly became acceptable to see a therapist, to process the often difficult socialization of childhood, to somehow find a part of ourselves lost or perhaps never experienced. But in our long introspection, we seemed in the end to reach another revelation. We realized we could process our inner lives forever and nothing might change. For what we most longed for, what we most hoped to regain, was a transcendental experience and inner connection to the divine. It is this awareness that propelled us back towards spirituality in the 1980s. In the traditional churches, it took form as a move towards substance and away from church's social gatherings. Outside the traditional religions, this awareness manifested as individually discovered spiritual approaches, usually combinations of particularly religious truth and often synthesized with the mystical descriptions of various visions of the East, loosely called the New Age movement. The 1980s proved to be a broad experimental samplings of various spiritual approaches. Eastern religions, rebirthing, firewalking, vision questing, channeling, out-of-body experiences, crystal energies, psychic development, UFO watching, pilgrimage to sacred sites, meditation of every description, paganism, aura reading, and card drawing, to name a few. All were looked at and investigated while we searched for this actual spiritual experience. Some were found to be silly, some helpful, but this active experimentation, this sorting, has now left us in a unique position as we look at our situation in the 1990s. Creating a new worldview, freed from our 500-year-long circular preoccupation, we are now pulling together a consensus about our higher spiritual nature, propelling the shift in consciousness in the process of clearing and opening ourselves psychologically, and the exploration of a variety of spiritual paths, synthesizing what we valued in the psycho-spiritual realm with what we've discovered in the scientific realm. We're awakening to nothing less than a new, more relevant, more truthful reality. The second sight insights then solidifies our perception of mysterious coincidences as the whole feature of a whole new way of approaching life. Connecting to the spiritual energy. As the manuscript teaches, in order to evolve, we must first reconnect with what we are surviving for as a human race. For the entire culture to thrive, a critical number of people must open to the idea of allowing intuition to guide them back into a connection with the spiritual. The second insight, therefore, is the macrocosmic view of our group, consciousness in which we have been preoccupied with, competing, controlling, conquering the truths of this belief system are what we are living with today. In essence, what we thought was what we got. Crossroads. We are at an extremely exciting juncture with a vast array of choices never before seen. This period of cross-fertilization between the scientific advances in physics and telecommunications with the emerging strains of spirituality, ecology, alternative healing, and the psychology is already preparing us for the future. Now our task, both culturally and individually, is to continue to choose more expansive, more life-enhancing priorities. Your own willingness to take time to study the Celestine prophecy is part of the evolutionary process. The amount of consciousness you bring to the collective mind is part of your contribution. Personal timeline from macrocosmic to microcosmic. This macrocosmic view of history, presented by the second insight, can be experienced in the microcosm of each of our lives. History is the story of our lives through time, and your present life reflects our collective life. Jung, in speaking about spiritual themes and dreams, said, "One must always remember that every man, in a sense, represents the whole of humanity and its history. What was possible in the history of mankind at large is also possible on a small scale in every individual. What mankind has needed may eventually be needed by the individual too. Therefore, applying the second insight to our own life story helps us to understand some of the restlessness and searching for meaning that we are experiencing. In order to see larger patterns at work in your life, you might want to think back over the major sections of your life and write down what your main lessons have been. This is a very helpful procedure for revealing how your beliefs, values, and expectations change. The second insight shows that many of us are beginning to realize that our common destiny is to live life from a more spiritual point of view. Apply this insight type to your own history and see what you find. At the end of this section, exercises are given for doing a personal timeline for both individual and group study, which I'm not going to share with you. I'm not going to do all that sort of stuff, but this is just sort of give you a very little bit of a clue on each of the insights. And you can do whatever you want with how you develop them. Current preoccupations. Every thought, decision, and action we make each day creates our continuing reality. We're acutely aware of this when we set concrete goals, such as I'm going to lose 10 pounds before the holidays, or I'm starting a savings account for a vacation. With specific goals like these, we eventually see that we have either succeeded, failed, or fallen short of our intention. A more visible level of preoccupation will be these thoughts that you have on a daily basis, especially when you wake up in the morning and go to sleep at night. It's been estimated that we have about 90,000 thoughts a day, the majority of them negative. Core beliefs. Subtle and ever-present core beliefs are invisible, determining factors in our lives. These thoughts imperceptibly organize our internal energy field and determine our continuing reality. At the hidden foundation of our everyday thoughts about the laundry, picking up the children, wanting more money, are basic assumptions that we really question. These common assumptions learned from our culture are such beliefs as I'm a separate individual who must compete for my livelihood, or I'm aging, or the world of matter is what really counts. This deep level of preoccupation must first be brought into awareness before it can be expanded or changed. This idea of the power of core beliefs to mold our everyday life and attract synchronicity is the foundation of what we call new paradigm thinking. A paradigm is a model or ideal pattern of thought or action. Our new model of life then shows how our beliefs create much of what happens to us. Joseph Campbell, the great scholar of mythology, describes the evolutionary process of going beyond the known in what he calls the left-hand path. In myths, which carry the living paradigms of all cultures, the hero traditionally chooses the left-hand path as the place where he will encounter new information and discover the truth. The right-hand path is the current dilemma, the status quo, the place where all the problems are. In order to transform the dilemma, new material must be enlisted. Thus, the myths awaken within us, the archetype of the journey towards transformation. We are never without the hope of discovery and recovery. As the second insight points out, the new paradigm or a new thinking began appearing in the decade of the 1960s. Through the medium of the human potential movement, new thinking has emerged in many fields, demonstrating the truth of the unity of body and mind. Evidence of the rising popularity and acceptance of this new thought is such best-selling books such as Ageless Body, Timeless Mind. My physician, Deepak Chopra. Chopra highlights some of the fundamental points that distinguish new and old thinking. For example, he compares the old basic assumption. There is an objective world independent of the observer, and our bodies are an aspect of this objective world. With the new paradigm concept, the physical world, including our bodies, is a response of the observer. We create our bodies as we create the experience of our world. In spite of the wealth of metaphysical literature that has always taught us that we create our reality, this is an astounding thought to those of us who feel frustrated by our lives, our jobs, the state of our finances or health. As our character found in the Celestine prophecy, the very size and potency of plants were affected by the positive energy sent to them by the researchers. Every day there is a growing body of medical and scientific research to corroborate the truth that reality is an outgrowth of mental attention. This one assumption alone gives us back our power and promises hope for the future. Another core assumption from our previous thinking, which Chopra debunks, is human awareness can be completely explained as a product of biochemistry. New information has come in to show us that perception is a learned phenomenon. The world you live in, including the experience of your body, is completely dictated by how you learn to perceive it. If you change your perception, you change the experience of your body and your world. In this study guide, we hope to help you rethink some of your past assumptions so that you can perceive a greater lesson or purpose behind all of your achievements, failures, or challenges. By adopting a positive, curious, conscious, adventuring outlook, your world can begin to look as you would like it to look. A third assumption of the old paradigm, again from Chopra, is our perception of the world is automatic and gives us an accurate picture of how things really are. One of the most exciting of the new paradigm assumptions is that although each person seems separate and independent, all of us are connected to patterns of intelligence that govern the whole cosmos. Our bodies are part of a universal body, our minds an aspect of a universal mind. This idea is the foundation of the first insight, which teaches that we can begin to evolve consciously by noticing the coincidental events that are purposeful to our growth. We are not alone. The answers to our questions come to us through an intelligence greater than our conscious mind, if we but trust in this process. Listening for basic assumptions, we've presented only a few of the many new ideas that are coming forth now about redefining the world. The truth of these ideas can be experienced directly by you. For example, begin to listen to the statements that people make about life. How do you see them buying into the old ideas of scarcity, competition, and all the problems out there? As you talk with friends, practice becoming a detached observer for a few minutes. What do you hear yourself and your friends saying about life? Keep in mind that it's not helpful to rebuke others for their limiting attitudes. We evolve at our own pace. There is no need to create new jargon or foster any separatism between those who are enlightened and those who are still searching or suffering. The simple process of observation, reflection, and acceptance will create a different energy for yourself and others. However, if there is a time when you sense you could make a difference, let the moment guide you. Follow your intuition. Summary of the second insight. The second insight is the awareness that our perception of mysterious life coincidences is a significant historical occurrence. After the collapse of the medieval worldview, we lost the security that came from the church's explanation of the universe. Therefore, 500 years ago, we collectively decided to focus on mastering nature, on using our science and technology to settle into the world. We set out to create a secular security to replace the spiritual one we had lost. To feel more secure, we systematically pushed away and denied the mysterious aspects of life on this planet. We crafted the illusion that we lived in a universe that was entirely explainable and predictable, and where chance events had no meaning. To maintain the illusion, we tended to deny any evidence contrary, to restrict scientific research into paranormal events, and to adopt an attitude of absolute skepticism. Exploring the mystical dimensions of life became almost taboo. Gradually, however, an awakening has begun. Our awakening is nothing less than breaking free from the modern age's secular preoccupation and opening our minds to a new, more truthful view of the world. Okay, that's it for me for Insight 2. Don't forget to check the links down below. Check the links on my channel. Like, subscribe, and ring the bell so you know when the next video will be uploaded. Take care and blessed be.